life in so-called, what do we call it, Western democracy, it makes me think, believe it or believe it not, of life in a protection racket run by a crime syndicate. I think about the Cray twins of old London town, and how they demanded money from law-abiding businesses in return for not inflicting damage, or worse. But victims of protection rackets, it's always the same. All that people get in return for paying up every week, handing over hard-earned cash to an organisation they're justifiably afraid of, was then and is still nothing. That's what you get. You got the most you ever got was nothing. The only return on the protection money was being left alone, was not being hurt, was not seeing your business smashed up or set on fire, until the same time next week when more money would be demanded. And that's how I feel when I look out at the world. And I suppose the question that I would pose this week is, why are we paying for this? Why are we still paying for this? Apart from the fear of the consequences, obviously, why do we keep funding this with our taxes and all of the rest? Because, and this is crucial, in contrast to the protection rackets of old, we're not even being left alone anymore. We part with all the cash. We hand over the council tax and the income tax and the capital gains tax and the value added tax and the corporation tax and all the rest of it, but we're still not left alone. Now they're after us all the time, regardless. It's everywhere, and it's woven, I would say, into the very fabric of society. I mean, anywhere you look, there's examples. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, for heaven's sake. Now, they're empowered to demand money from everyone in the country. Anyone who wants the right just to turn on a television. And they demand that money on pain of fines, or worse, imprisonment. Send you to prison for not paying your licence fee. And in return, they do no more now than push state propaganda. That's what the BBC is now. It's the mouthpiece of the state, and thereby of the vested interests and the transnational corporations that run the state. This week in London, for example, citizens gathered to protest Mayor Sadiq Khan's ruinous ULEZ, that's ultra low emissions zone. And when BBC News reported that protest, they described them right off the top as far right. Far right for insisting on the right to the freedom to drive their cars where and when they want. Far right. Now, I would say that when the state, in the form of the state broadcaster, dismisses, slanders citizens as far right just for protesting legislation that will severely affect their ability to conduct their businesses and to go about their lives, then I would say we have to look around at our predicament and take stock appropriately. And so I ask again, the question of the week is, why are we paying for this? Why are we financing this syndicate? And I say again also that the blatant nature of the racket is just everywhere you look. I live in Scotland, as you know, and the governing party here in the Scottish Parliament is the SNP, the Scottish National Party. And it is in the throes, you might have noticed, of a very public meltdown. After years of unquestionable dominance, due largely to the complicit nature of the Scottish media and everybody else's media, but there's a public meltdown going on. It's been a long time coming. Ongoing investigation and all that, so there's limits to what I or anyone else can say right now. But I think it's fair to observe that it's hard to remember ever having witnessed a spectacle like a police forensic tent erected in the garden of the home of a First Minister and her husband, the chief executive of the party. A rank of police cars parked outside, officers digging in the back garden. When has anyone ever seen the like? And it's also worth pointing out, probably obliged to point out, no charges so far. But suffice it to say, we're in new territory. Here in Scotland, I think, as Dorothy said to Toto in The Wizard of Oz, we're not in Kansas anymore. In the wider UK, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, in his tiny suit, is having to answer more questions about his wife, daughter of the billionaire owner of Infosys, the company that's equipped to build a government all the infrastructure required by, for instance, a digital ID, a central bank digital currency, a social credit system. The PM's wife's dad, his company is that can fit you up with all that stuff if you want it. And the latest is that, apparently a person might notice that a business in which Mrs. Sunak has shares stands to benefit from the last budget, the budget overseen by Mr. Sunak. And questions have been asked about the appropriateness or not of that situation. Where else? Across the pond, across the Atlantic, US President Joe Biden and his family are, to put it mildly, mired in controversy and have been for weeks and months, related to, let's say, how to put this, business dealings in Ukraine and China. France, people are revolting again. The peasants, God bless them, in their millions, whether or not you're seeing it on the mainstream media, they are up in arms in their millions, protesting the behaviours of their president Emmanuel Macron, another wearer of tiny suits. In the Netherlands, the farmers still fighting for survival in the face of their government. Week after week it goes on. People everywhere are doing all they can to resist bullying and corruption, frankly, protection, racketeering, on the part of those inviting themselves to have more and more power over everyone's everyday lives. All around us we see the powerful helping themselves to more and more power over us. They are blatant now, though. They are unashamed, unabashed. Even worse than that, it seems obvious now that much of their behaviour is deliberately shaped to enrage us, and so to provoke us. Decent, law-abiding people everywhere are being backed into corners from which, if we want to continue with free lives, we'll have to fight to escape. Governments all over the West seem to be deliberately leaving people feeling like they have no option but to rise up. And if they do rise up, those governments will have the excuses they need to take a hammer and nail this coffin shut. I've mentioned a few examples: the BBC, the Mayor of London, the Scottish National Party, the UK Prime Minister, the White House in the United States of America. And they're just parts of the protection racket that we can see. Behind them, out of sight, is a billionaire class that has always treated us, the people, with contempt. And for a long time it seemed they would do as they do while leaving us to live our lives. That's how it was for a long time. But something incredibly serious has changed. Now that billionaire class and the politicians that serve them seem determined finally to take control of every last aspect of our lives. The Cray twins, you might say, aren't even content to leave us alone anymore. They want it all. They want control over every aspect of our lives, every minute of every day. They'll continue to fly in their private jets. They'll continue to go where they want and do as they want. If they get their way, we will have nothing and be going nowhere. So, finally I ask again, why are we paying for this? And I'll end on a thought experiment that I invite you to join me within. What would happen? What would happen if we stopped paying for this? Council tax, income tax, and the rest. It's just a thought experiment. What would happen if millions of people, all at the same time, just stopped paying for this? Like I say, I'm only asking.